Yeah, I see that Cain mindset in myself sometimes, but it's clung on to so strongly that it's like I can't see myself when I'm in that mood as anything but this victim, even though other people who don't know my story look at me externally and may have the same envy.
Yeah, not only do they, because I know a part of me that would look at you when I was 18, going college graduate, with a girl like that, what the did he do? Because what does my whole life revolved around? How can I get her? And not only how can I get her, how can I make sure these guys don't even come close to me? My life was in opposition of others. What did I feel? Always lonely. I separated myself from people. I had no connection. Everything was a metric of control. And that's the whole thing. Truth be told, the Cain and Abel story, which is something that like you're struggling with that archetype at the moment, right? Which is your brother, which is what we really all are, is the person that you clearly see has more favor and God turns to them despite your best efforts or even efforts at all, right? And then you're left with the existential question, which is, did you just make him to spite me as your hand is towards God, right? What I find was very interesting is what he tells Cain. He goes, why is it you turn to my brother's offerings or sacrifices and not mine? And the second he saw that, there was like a frame. He goes, hey, Cain, why is your countenance fallen? Very much similar to a father would. And then he hears this dialogue, and you see God goes, whoa, mother, I'll right hook you if you keep doing this. And he says, he doesn't say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. How you feeling? He just says with like a level of reverence. He goes, surely if you improve yourself, things will get better. If you don't, sin crouches at the door. And then Cain goes to inquire of his brother and strikes him. And now that's like the most terrifying thing you could ever hear. And then the next passage is his blood cries from the ground, you know. And what's his life? He has to run and hide, and he has a brand, a mark of shame, right? He's confirmed that to be true because he didn't improve himself. So the process by which you improve yourself isn't so much it's maybe inspired by insecurity, but resolved through understanding. And that's exactly how the biblical stories end. Cain and Abel, Esau, Jacob, Ephraim and Manasseh. And those are the two, that's the duality, where the older serves the younger. And of course, Cain is the older brother. You know, that's when it really pisses you off. And by the way, I know what that's like. I'm the youngest of 7 siblings. Not one of them has envy towards me because they understand their own gifts. It's probably the most difficult point of a young man's life. I also do believe that it's at the beginning of the Bible for the one reason that it's there to show you the beginning of your life. If you do not get past this, you'll never know Revelation, which comes later, right? By which you start to see the Word of God that liberates you and frees you from what you understand your reality to be. So it's more than an understanding that I have.
Now, the behavioral evidence is there. You shoulder your cross and pick up responsibility. Things get better. You act like a resentful victim. Not only does your own life get worse, you push other people away. And yet, there's something satisfying about it. Why, despite the evidence right in front of us of this attitude only makes your mindset and your life worse, why do people gravitate towards it?
This is why I wanted to talk to you so bad. I knew that you would make my brain spin. There's an inclination towards it because it's convenient. That's often what I noticed. People would like what's convenient, not what actually requires them to improve themselves. Like, for example, you could often see when somebody who would much rather stay resentful would put the projections onto other people, right? So they're doing the one thing that's least true to themselves, separating from those that they love, right? Which is like paradoxical. But also, they are living within their own egocentricity, which is enough for them to sustain it. And that feels as good as them getting the connection. But the problem is there's a fundamental break in their value system. Meaning, do I discover the truth or do I just confirm my own bias and claim that's the truth, right? So there's a level of courage a person needs to have, which is why I really admire you. You know, even before we did this, you were like, some things I want to talk to you about. And I said, you know, there are some things maybe you're coming from. And you said, I'll consider that. I want to address this, right? So there was almost like we were on the same page. We were looking for the same thing. Because, you know, in a lot of ways, that conversation was deeply healing to me. Because you're here, yeah.
Well, it's that resentful projection. It's this thought of, is this guy a narcissist, a fraud? Is this too good to be true? That you're the same age as me, seemingly you're so much more confident than me, and earning a living from this without the same academic credentials that I do pride myself on, but it's also a big sacrifice, right? And then there's this thought of, here's a person who's pursuing more or less the same dream as me, in some ways filtered out the academic, everything needs to be, say, empirically verifiable. But when you're talking about archetypes, You can't do that. When you're talking about spirituality, it's a deeply personal and metaphysical process. It's not going to be subject to the scientific method.
No.
And I'm more interested in those philosophical ideas than the science. The science, to me, is just the way to tap into that and turn it into a career, that intellectual love of ideas.
Of course. I think for most people, it's breaching the ego, right? Mm-hmm. It's marketing. So you already know your niche, right? So for example, if you wanted to go ahead and teach at Harvard, right, which would be really cool, you would use the thing that they go, oh, you're credible, right? And you would teach the truth, right? So that's very similar for anybody. Is that, and this is even something I noticed, that people internalize my information far better when it suits their image of me. When I go against their image, they typically associate the worst thing possible about me, right? Like, no, you're supposed to stay there, right? Well, that's kind of how a projection works. Like, you really like a girl. You want to know how you f***ed up. Project onto her. Anytime she moves out of that projection, bite, criticize, manipulate. No, me, only me. This. If you move, I'll rip you apart, right? So that's the aspect of people who are also not accepting the alternatives of their projections. Projections are the form of protection, right? Which is why it's very important for people to understand that. If you have been hurt in your past, and which is what I wanted to show, more of like the psychological reason why somebody would much rather project and hold their resentment and create distance, the likelihood of you being hurt again if you're not willingly discovering this aspect of yourself and seeing how this cycle has been repeated in your life, guys like me, people like me, presenting something potentially false and how it's hurt you, now you'll understand why you don't. But if you have courage and the willingness to discover truth, that will free you from the wound that has once hurt you. So it is ultimately, the ultimate healer is truth and discovering that. Now here's the thing. It's not just me going, Adam, my son, let me rise you up. No, it's not. What do you think in my life I've experienced cycles of? That conversation with all of the people closest to me. And I used to go, this is just what it is when you're smart and intelligent and muscular and tall. People just want to rip you down. That's a sign of romantic, right? It sounds like I'm sucking my own there, right? If you really listen. When I said, no, put this aside. This has nothing to do with you. Oh, you feel a lot better, right? Now, these people are with you, and you're creating separation because you're making it about you. And that showed up in my relationships, that showed up in my work, that showed up with my clients, that showed up with my family. And that's when I was like, wait, if this keeps happening to me, and if I don't confront this and I don't discover the truth, and I'm at least not willing to listen to perhaps the opposition, I will never be set free from the thing that just seems to be consistently confronting me in my life. So once you realize that, you're actually realizing that being vulnerable came at a cost when you were younger. But there's more than just your past experiences and your personal perception of what has happened to you. And your willingness to sit there with me on the call and keep presenting it, that was healing. I saw something that existed outside of the bubble, right? I saw the motives you had outside of what you were saying. That was inspirational. It's like, you want something here. And I get it, it's a struggle. It wouldn't be worth it if it wasn't, right? And it was for me too. It was like, I had to just like, hey, calm your physiology down. Like, listen here, there's something here outside of this that brought you guys together. Remember, right? You reached out. Right. So unless I want to confirm a bias here, which would be the worst thing I could ever let you do or let myself do, let's have the conversation and let's get down to the bottom of it. Because I do believe that more people are on the same side than you could possibly imagine. The barista that kicked me out of the coffee shop a couple weeks ago projected all of these things onto me because I was very charming. I'm sure he sucked with women, and in high school he never got any attention from them. I was the bad guy. I work with guys like him. I'm also the guy that helps him. Right? So it's very interesting how that works. It's like the things that you want to have access to that you are too prideful to just present yourself to, that thing has also hurt you once. So don't forget that story too. It's the
Luciferian intellect, this idea you'd rather be king of hell than a servant in heaven. Even if you see someone that you admire, you could emulate them, but in doing that, you're admitting they have something you don't. And you can create this narcissistic fabrication. You tear them down. Oh, they're just a narcissist. They're just fabricating it. What I'm doing is really right. Then you get the validation of you're the better person, and you don't have to do any work aside from constructing this story. That's the whole point, right? So you nailed it right there. That it just so conveniently, you can cast me out, and you need to do, not a little, nothing. Right? Nothing. And so I remember telling you that, which was, I'm either the charlatan, which is a word I didn't even know, I'm not a Harvard graduate, or I'm a mature individual who actually is onto something.
And that could be beyond your own beliefs and perceptions of things, right? Which could challenge you. Because now that's inviting something beyond your own beliefs, which is inviting something that you're connected to beyond your own understanding of who you are. Now you could be a monster, right? A potential monster. Or perhaps the savior, the successful revolutionary, if you want to be archetypal about it. And you could be the guy bringing that kind of peace. Which is why it's almost like the things that are too good to be true challenge us the most. Because often when we've seen those things in life, they weren't too good to be true. They were the devil with a cloak and dagger, right? But in life, there's a certain point where some things are beyond your belief and they will feel too good to be true. And that challenges you more than as if it were the manifestation of darkness and malevolence. So now that's the opportunity by which you go, wait. As I had a salesman call me the other day going, look, and he said it like this, and this was after I stopped making things about me, which is like the rule number one, everybody over here, don't make it about you if it keeps repeating in your life. You're not understanding about something about reality relative to yourself. Not the self with a small, big self. Who you are, what you represent, how people see you. That'll give you a lot of power too, by the way. Because if I know how people see me, if they either see me as the devil or this angelic being, oh bro, I can manipulate anyone. Because I could just play into their projections. And I have more awareness. And that can make me Luciferian by definition. But also, you want to help people see you, and you want to give yourself an opportunity to be seen. There's always a likelihood of being hurt there. So what ended up happening with one of my sales reps, he gave me a call and he's like, look dude, you're either the Messiah that redeems all of society, which I rolled my eyes when I heard it. He said, or you're the devil. And I'm leaning towards that. And I said, okay. Then if I'm either one or the other, it seems like I have no room to be a human here. There's just no possibility of that being there. And also, it seems to me like you're projecting something onto me so that you could attach yourself to it. It keeps you completely safe. I need you to do yourself a favor. You are not safe around any human. You need to be present to realize that people will become unconscious. And you might be on the shotgun seat of that car as they're not even looking with their eyes closed. It is your job to go, I think, oh, wow, right? But most people want to just go, wait, you take care of me, you become my Lord and Savior, and they disassociate. Same thing with love. I want you to love me so I don't have to love myself. That's most people nowadays, right? They're looking for the perfect prospect. Okay, she's kind of up. That's good. She won't leave. Super insecure.
Oh, I had those thoughts in my teen years, my first few relationships.
Tell me about that.
I wanted someone more insecure. I even told my friends this. I said, if they're more insecure, they're going to be more clingy. They're going to hold on to you. Like, it's so warped that I viewed insecurity, the type of clingy insecurity in a relationship, as a form of security, because I didn't know how to cultivate the authentic form of security that I have now. So for me, security was, well, every relationship is a power dynamic. There's a reacher, a settler.
Right, that's the red pill narrative right there. Everything is a power dynamic. If you ever lose frame at any point, that whole paradigm is created through insecurities, traumas, and fears that have not been confronted, that keep them limited to that. So at any point they're not in power, they're gone. They can't access themselves. So they only exist on 1 out of 16 emotions that they could experience. So this was something that you used to experience, and this was in college or high school?
College. I graduated high school without my first kiss. And college, you know, I had experiences with girls, but it was all through dating apps. And it's so interesting because you're presented with people on a silver platter, and there's some level of manipulation there. You're taking your cultivated best photos, you're maybe slightly exaggerating your height. Like we were talking about our height standing up, and you asked me how tall. I said, well, 6 feet, technically 6.5 inches, but I knew that if I put 6'0", every other guy who's 5'11" is doing that, maybe even 5'10", because girls would constantly run into me. They'd say, you're not 6 feet tall, you're way taller. And I'm like, no, I'm exactly 6 feet tall. Everyone else is lying, but I realize you just have to put 6'1".
So maybe I'm 6'2", not 6'3", you know? That's what my brother tells me all the time. It's like, yeah, when I wear heels, you know, I'm probably 6'2".
Right.
That's an opportunity for me to be more honest. Yeah, there's a lot of manipulation in dating apps that people aren't aware of at all. It's like you're presenting your projection and you're thinking this is going to go well. Let me give you dating in a nutshell. Shatter the projection as soon as possible so you can create a connection. Not who you want them to be, but who they really are, and then you could choose them, right? So the dating app already is setting you up for disaster. You know, I know you're often like, oh, I'll put all these things. No, you're rewarding the control. That's a difficult thing in life. If you realized how many people were at an airport with their phone at their face, you would realize why people don't meet each other in real life. They're afraid. They don't have the ability to go, oh, projection, confrontation, oh, no thank you, not interested. People have lost that they're more likely to hide behind establishments and institutions to do the talking for them. And of course, they think it's the voice of God. It's not. It's the voice of the devil. If you're hiding, it's absolutely the voice of corruption.
And then you rationalize it. You say, in fact, dating apps are better because I get to read people's bio, I learn about them. If I approach a stranger at the airport, I don't know anything about them. They could be a psychopath. Well, it could be online too. In fact, they might be more likely.
They're far more likely to be a psychopath online. And I'm absolutely going to communicate that to everybody. If they DM'd you or they met you on a dating app, they are far more likely to be a psychopath. And I know you're probably like, oh, the guy that approached me, he's absolutely crazy. No. He's sane. The person who's done that doesn't really care. There's no actual emotional connection to you. It's what you symbolize and represent that gets him high. And he doesn't even need to get rejected by it because it doesn't matter. Neither do you. And they're already sending that message. It's like, how could that person matter? And also, you could do that, and that's what everybody's cognitive dissonance is around. If you're on a dating app, you've said yes to 5 people, as 500 people have said no to you. You don't get to experience the aspect of your humanity that's not for everybody, and you get to continue on with this ego. So it's actually for people that are very protective, have very big egos. It's not the guys like me. I can be arrogant, and that could be a product of my ego, right? Oh, I don't know something, and let's say I attach all my values to not knowing something. I will be far more arrogant, opposed to just, oh, that's something I don't know. Tell me about that, right? Mm-hmm. But if I attach my value to needing to know something, well, that makes me more powerful, right? And there's the red pill narrative right there. Everything is about power and control. They have no belief in themselves because what they are sucks. If you ever really ask them, they don't believe in it at all. They see the life as like as a chessboard, and who they are is not something desirable. And humanity is in fact the worst thing that you can come in with. So all of these things are being reinforced by a lot of the establishments that people can easily have access to in the name of connection, love, family, and I think it's scary. I think it's really scary.
I imagine when we were teenagers, you were playing that game. I saw your personal Instagram account, not the one that's like this with all the academic content, speaking truth and motivating people. It seems that it hasn't been active in a few years, but if you look at it, it's all these photos of like you with your abs flexing in front of a nice car, like all of this really LA boy stuff. And
it's tragic, huh?
It's the Cain and Abel thing again. It sparks this simultaneous admiration and resentment in me, especially because, like I mentioned, when I was 18, I was shy, awkward, lanky, and here you are doing that. And I'm imagining, what is the mindset of someone who's posing to take those photos? Like, clearly, they must be a narcissist. They're loading all this up on dating apps so they can sleep with a bunch of girls, manipulate them for short-term gratification. You demonize them in this way.
Yeah, anything. This is something very interesting for anybody who looks at pictures or photos. Catch yourself in the projection. See how there's a lot of things that you wish you had access to that person does that you don't. And then now you'll go, okay, wait, there's already something off here, which is why often typically you stop projecting on people at all. You start to get curious about people. In fact, you start to play the game, are they this thing? And then you present something, and then they can confirm that, right? But even then, something I've realized even about the guy with 6 packs in front of a car, they're like sweet, sensitive little boys if you really get to know them, right? They're like, oh, what? Oh, thank you. You like that photo? I'm insecure. Don't look at me, right? So it's just like the thing about the social media and the virtual avenues that we have. They create more disbelief in yourself. If you closed all of those doors and you were left with the people around you, which was the most difficult thing to do, I had to do that for a little bit in my life, to start actually developing a real brain, not a porn brain. That's the porn brain. Instagram, Pornhub, they thrive off of that because you don't need to take accountability for anything that you project onto them. Eventually that goes projecting into the porn you watch, into the people that you admire, into the film that you watch. You're like, if I was on stage, I'd be, And what's happening with that? You're getting further and further and further away from life. And it's like the carpet getting slipped out from under your feet as you fall into a void, and it consumes you. And now some people are lucky enough to have the grace of God call out to them, right? To clear the darkness for a little bit, to realize that they've been falling. Not everybody does, though. Not everybody does. And unfortunately, they're too far gone. They're too far gone from that light. They're too far gone from that understanding or even the willingness to let that happen. Which is why I have a tremendous amount of respect for anybody who's willing to confront somebody else and get down to the bottom of something, considering that they're also on the front lines of that conversation. That's somebody I respect. Whatever they present,
If it's you're a manipulator, a liar, a narcissist, and a charlatan, new word I learned, the other person needs to be coming in going, and I might be the insecure guy coming in with all of these projections. Fair enough, now let's have a conversation. If we both don't have a value around truth, it will be about us. If we do, I'll go, you're mentioning something very valuable there. Which is why, and you might notice this, if you look at today's society, people pleasers and narcissists make the best couples. And it's like, well, why? They're there to teach each other a little bit about each other. Now, if they both had a core value, which is why you gotta raise your kids right around truth, vulnerability, and honesty, well then you'll be able to go, oh wait, you're right. That's a behavior of survival I have. I'll get rid of that. That's not honest even. It's not even honest. That's protective. And same thing with the nice guy, you're right. It's protective. I'm hiding because I'm afraid of rejection and I'm 5'5". I mean, a story about my life is my friend, one of my best friends, he's 5'6". When we started hanging out, he was 200 pounds. And dude, this dude has a brain like Nietzsche, okay? He would let me go on my ego trips for the first 4 months of us hanging out. I'm at the coffee shop, I flirt with the girl, and he just kind of accepts the shotgun seat of defeat, right? He wouldn't tell me it, and I'd have a great time because he'd never tell me no. He would always go reward me, tell me how you did that, that's interesting, analyze. And then one day came around where he's like, no, this isn't me being a nice guy. I actually have no insecurities around confronting him. I'm gonna call him out on how he's the most protective, egocentric rationalizer I've ever met. And that was the day I actually started becoming intelligent. Now I know that's a crazy thing to say. No, I became aware of my own behaviors that were keeping me stuck in cycles. And he's taught me so much. But you wanna know what happened every time he'd call me out? The projection of him would come up. I wasn't the only guy being projected on. I would project onto other people who weren't like me. And
he's
what
just
was
jealous.
That? He's jealous, he's envious. It's because he's not 6'3", he's not good looking, he's not good with girls, etc. He wish he has what I has, he's too resentful. And then I caught myself in that and I was like, dude, this is happening to me because I do it to others. I separate myself from those people and subconsciously manipulate those people. And they do the same thing with me. If we are both not willing to be vulnerable with each other, which is the courage to just go, let's talk, see how they react when you present your quote, not even accusation, concern. An accusation will create a defensive thing. You're this, this, and this. Well, if I am, let's hang up the phone, right? I have a feeling you're this, this, and this. Okay? It's just a feeling. That's connected to other things outside of who I am. Let's talk. I would like to have you closer, not farther away. Let's get down at the bottom of it. That takes somebody who's really established and actually done the work around their traumas and their insecurities. Those people can have love, they can grow strong, they can be strong. And the best part is they won't push away the people that they want the closest to them. And there's a sadness to the Cain and Abel story, is that he's his brother. In a world of first generation people, you kill him? There's nothing more sad than that. You know, of course the story of Noah is right after. Just drown it. Drown it, you know?
I've been struggling to reconcile these spiritual, psychological interests with my study of neuroscience and evolutionary biology.
Mm-hmm. Where do you feel they conflict?
First, I think they overlap more than not. The mating psychology interest, both from these personal experiences I've shared and from the academic side, you know, my research is on sex hormones and sex differences. Any difference you see in the brain, a reliable cognitive or behavioral difference, especially when it's cross-species, you can craft an evolutionary story about it. And it's usually going to boil down to something about sex differential reproductive strategies.
Yeah.
You know, sperm is cheap and multiple, and eggs are costly. It makes sense that men are going to take more risks and pursue more variable strategies, because you could just have one man fertilizing dozens of eggs, and as long as he survives, as long as there's that one man with the better genes willing to take that risk, it doesn't matter. Women are more likely to pursue these stable mating strategies. So you see parallels of that all over in your day-to-day interactions and in psychology. But that presents a scaffolding of a zero-sum game. It's this idea that everyone, especially men, are always competing for mating success. And there's this idea of fitness, which could be literal fitness, you know, how tall are you, how fit are you? But then other things like intellect, creativity, anything that ultimately gets you sex. So as I got into this and Red Pill and thinking more and more...
My God, you're the devil, dude. You got into Harvard and a psychology degree, and you studied Red Pill. It's like, I mean, that's the whole thing I really want to challenge. It's in a vacuum, right? It's a vacuum for what? Your projections. It's void of reality.
right? A story tells you more than just the sentence. It tells you something in its entirety, right? And you're not just like, okay, Alice in Wonderland is about what? It's one of my favorite movies. Well, it's about a little girl who's bored with the story about history of how men and women come together, and then she goes down this rabbit hole, right? But what brings her into that rabbit hole? A rabbit with a ticking clock going, I'm late, I'm late, I'm late. And this is a really wonderful story because in relationship to women, how do they find themselves? There's a ticking clock that you have around your fertility, which is what a rabbit symbolizes. So as kids, you go, oh, fluffy rabbit. As an adult, you're like, what the my daughter watching, you know? And then you're like, well, it's a story about Alice finding herself. What does the story amount to? She's aware of the manipulative men in relationship to what she is, right? They know, she doesn't, so she resorts to kind of more running and avoiding the situations and altercations until she realizes if she runs away from everything, she'll become the queen who's married to a beta bitch king as everybody listens to her, as she's alone, sad and miserable, because nobody really cares about her, because if they did, they'd say, you're being a child. So maybe this was her growing up, right? And then of course she wakes up from her trip. And it's like, that's the trip of self-discovery and in relationship to women. So now here's another one for people to get out of the paradigms of these vacuums, right? Because that's a perfect way to project that men are useless unless they do something. That's within most people's personal experiences. So psychologically, you are more likely to project that onto the science, meaning that the science doesn't really solve the problem. It further spirals the person who created it because they are making it within a vacuum. But now for somebody, let's just say for my beliefs, looks at that thing, you go, whoa, what the f***? Zoom it out even more in relationship to not just sexual fitness and reproduction, but into how we exist with a neocortex, right? And then now you're a neuroscientist and a psychologist. So you're going to be experiencing a lot of the work within the vacuum and then expand it. Right? Sure, that could be true inside this bubble, but that's not the truth about men and women, right? Because we don't just exist in vacuums. But if you keep thinking from that vacuum in your life, women don't just become, oh, Julia, you're so beautiful. Your family's awesome. The things you believe in. I love that you're a middle sister. It's now woman, you, meaning your ego, and then other species things that can meet that. You cannot have a relationship. And sure, there's going to be aspects in a relationship where you get hurt and trust is broken, but to reduce it down to that little sphere will suffocate you down to that, right? And by the way, the worst part is you become impossible to access because your whole life has been reinforcing of a particular narrative you never challenged.
Well, this is a deep, deep tension, not only in academia, but in our culture. It's Nietzsche's Death of God. It's Hume's is-ought problem, right? Is are the facts. And as you said, the facts exist in a vacuum. You need a moral structure. You need a story to integrate them into, to guide your behavior. And we have a big problem taking that subjective process, right? What do I do? How do I figure out to live with objective data? Game theory, to some extent, succeeds at it because you can model people, but then you're making all these assumptions. You're just saying, these are like players in a video game. You're trying to maximize some resource.
It's godless. It's godless by nature. The presentation of it is void of the one thing everyone needs in order to find love and connection. The one thing all men really want is good sex more than they want numbers. They want good sex. And that struggles with a lot of men because, you know, as a man, you're going to be struggling with your overall instinct in relationship to your values, right? Instinct tells you sex with everything all the time. Values, something that speaks to your soul, a monogamous relationship that grows you constantly by which you can deepen that bond between you and her as you open up each other's walls and you become one flesh, right? But you're like, my personal experiences don't show that to be true because I see tall, dark, and handsome with twice the schlong I have, you know, and then this works out for him. And then you're playing these pictures in your own head without challenging anything. That's when it becomes really dangerous. It's truth be told, something I've realized even in my life that has ruined my life in relationship to women. I present a performance based off of a metric of control that women of actual intellect, that I actually respect with substantial spiritual quality, see right through like this. And I would know it would happen with me. I'd be doing my game. And then I see the girl that's smart, intelligent, spiritual, and beautiful. And I go up to her, and she sees right through me. And I go, no, this isn't who I am. So not only am I fake, I can't even be who I am when it's time to be me. I'm too busy chasing things that aren't even myself, constantly outside of me. I became the pickup artist or the guy that was like, learn this control. I loved psychology, but it was all a metric of me not believing in myself. And the belief in oneself is a very existential question. Yourself is not just composed of your experiences. It's the thing that you're connected to, that you actually have access to, that allows you to create in this life at all. Now, that's a much bigger question. You might have to put away some of the strategy and tactics. You might have to expose yourself to insecurities and traumas you've never faced that actually you've been running from. And perhaps in the name of dating, in the name of getting this girl, in the name of academia. And then now you find yourself, even if you continue doing this, it starts to pop up. But you become stronger and more convicted in your prior frame. So you continue to double down until you push everyone away. And then of course all your biggest fears tend to manifest. Your wife's with another man. Your degree never really mattered. All your clients hated you. They just liked that you run off insurance, right? And everybody in your life you're resentful for is actually resentful of you, because you pushed away everybody that challenges you. So all you have are the people that wish they could be like you. And so you exist in your own hell that you created, because nobody was ever at any point going, what's the truth of the matter outside of the things that you experience? Well, you're going to need to be mature in order to find out that. And you're going to have to be able to just play you. As difficult as that may be, whatever that may bring up to the surface, give that a go in your life, a level of play in relationship to you. More people wouldn't look toward you two. They would try to present what's true and maybe face the rejection that they're so afraid of.
So I've thought that the evolutionary biologists have it wrong when they say we're only pursuing survival and reproduction. There's meaning, there's something more than that. And different fields of psychology have different ideas about what that meaning is. Is it prestige? Is it social satisfaction? Mm-hmm. Is it self-actualization? That's a more spiritual process, so I think that gets at it, but it's so abstract, there's nothing there. I don't know if you need religion, but you definitely need narrative. You need a story to emulate. That's what I like about the archetypes idea. But
that's very rich.
I've been thinking, what am I really chasing? The best I've been able to come up with is truth. And the interesting thing is, science, which is an objective field, so they say, once you have this axiom accepted, you need to pursue truth, mm-hmm. Then you follow the data, you look at objective truth. But who told you truth is good? And what is the nature of that? Is truth identical with God? Is truth something God speaks into being? Is truth a means to an end and the real end is something rich. Moral?
Is truth God speaks into being, right? Or is truth God itself? Is mm-hmm. truth and God the same thing? An incorporation of that in your life is what liberates you and frees you. Now, is that an aspect of God that we are all trying to integrate ourselves into? Because we're imperfect in every way possible. So it almost feels like truth sometimes is like just a way to make ourselves feel better about our own actions. Mm-hmm. This is the truth, this is the right thing. I think it really does come down to the deep, deep, deep intentions that somebody comes in with. That there's a certain level of faith in even perhaps the things that you claim to be true. Now, it's almost like failure is inevitable when you think about it that way. Right? So then your ego is going to have its arms crossed, throwing a fit, yet there is absolutely a level of faith in what we present to be true, and to judge any tree is by its fruit. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to be willing to see what its fruit yields. And I'm not puritanistic at all. In fact, I'm the opposite. I'm humanistic, as in you look at people, and I know we strive towards purity as an ideal, which is why I think evolutionary psychology and biology, those guys typically really love that narrative, because it's within a bubble, and I'll tell you why that bubble is so strong. It's godless. So it's under the metric of control and power, and that's what they're a manifestation of. So they lack humanity, their ability to bond intimately. They don't even have children, because they know they're alpha males, so they sleep with over 1,000 women. If you were evolutionarily an alpha male, you would have reproduced half the world by now. Andrew, or whoever other guy there is, And so that's always the big challenge, is it always seems to be that they discredit the fact that they have humanity themselves, and they play a game that lacks it. So they've adopted narcissism and psychopathy as a neutral baseline for their behavior, and nobody challenges it, not even them.
And it gives them permission insofar as they believe it. If the world is a moral vacuum, then why not use power? Why not lie?
Bingo. Why not lie if the world is a moral vacuum? Oh my God. There is literally no reason not to. And I was on a podcast the other day, and he was presenting this, that he had this girlfriend, she got pregnant, and she's like, oh, she's getting an abortion. And the first thing I said is, if you want to know if a guy is a grade A bitch, he's going to tell you to get an abortion. And it immediately just outed all of the evolutionary instincts, didn't it?
This is something I've struggled with myself, the rationalizing. You know, people talk about, especially when you're 18, you're first having sex, people ask, would you have a child at that stage? They say, no, I'm not ready. I don't have enough security. In fact, it would be cruel to the future child. It would be more sympathetic in this cosmic sense to abort that child, wait until a decade later when I have an income, when I'm married, when I can support that child. I'm sympathetic to those arguments. Now this is very vulnerable, right? Especially to those who think abortion is wrong. And I think it's wrong. Like, you're not going to do it for fun. It's a last resort. But should it ever be acceptable? And I don't even mean extreme cases of rape or a disabled child. I mean, if you're not ready and you think you won't parent that child properly, then you're just going to bring in one more traumatized child into the world. Is that a net negative? Is there any circumstance in which that's okay?
I think that this is where the question of morality comes into the picture, right? Well, one of them is, if you're 18, what choices do you know are good for you, right? Are you going to take the one that just so happens to be the one where you take no accountability for the behavior? You don't regard this. You make the best, quote, choice for yourself, and you disregard all of the consequences that you have from it that don't allow you to, by the way, change it all, right? So now there's a few questions to ask somebody, even if you're having sex, right? Which is maybe wake up to the consequences of it. But now we're in a society by which the sex is the thing we're trying to suppress the most, which is why it comes out on your it comes out of the seams. You see it on a poster. It's on your phone at easy access, one click of a finger. It's almost like people are disconnecting themselves from sex itself, right? So there's no reason to ask any questions if you can go ahead and just put it under the rug. But now if you really saw what it did to you, and even what the data shows that it does to you, is that it completely disconnects you from your femininity as a woman. And if you're a guy that's putting his hand up, you're completely going against everything that makes you a man, which is in service and protection of women and children. So these things have serious consequences tonight. Now, the whole point is that I just want to be like objective about it here, not even put in my own personal agenda, which I really have none in this regard, because people suffer tremendously. But the worst argument of all time is to perhaps maybe ask more from yourself in relationship to the things that are happening in your life, opposed to running away from it, because that's all people do. If that happened to you, bear it. Watch what comes up to the surface. Watch who you become. Okay, you're 18, you probably don't know what's best for you. You're 18, you probably don't know what's best for you. There will be experiences that shape you, right? So, and how do you know? There's something at the end of the day by which you believe at an existential level, something that has to be true about yourself that you hold yourself to, which is life has value. Am I here to protect it, create it, or devour it? And as a man, to protect it, provide for it, or to completely withdraw from it, which is what you're seeing collectively. You know, more fatherless homes than ever, and more single mothers than ever, and then more women in their 30s who are going to be single and more likely to not have children than throughout history has ever shown. And I think it would be great if you want to be a clown and just not consider any of these things in relationship to yourself, because you're going to be lucky. In other words, that's an expectation on God where you will be disappointed and not only resentful, you will hide behind the establishments that so happen to validate that resentment. As you become a force of evil, as you consciously tell yourself, I'm a good man, I'm a good woman, look at what I'm doing. And which is why I live to break those establishments that people hide behind. They're hiding behind it and they're not facing themselves. We are all imperfect. My God, we are so imperfect. It's almost absurd how imperfect we are and how conscious we are of that and how miserable it makes us in a lot of ways. Yet the solution to that is not to run and hide, but perhaps maybe to sit a little in the darkness and to just evaluate perhaps maybe what you defined as perfect is something you couldn't even understand. So maybe you're here to live a life, a good one, and you could experience that. The problem with hiding is that you're accepting weakness, structural weakness in yourself. No, revealing yourself to somebody or something, having a conversation by which you present the vulnerable insecurity, oh, guys like you make me feel like this, that made me feel this. You're becoming progressively more aware, meaning that you are standing on the side of truth that makes you stronger. These questions, they go unchecked long enough. You have enough people that are too afraid to speak because it becomes a stronger force in relationship to the opposing force, truth. So if you don't do something in direct relationship to that evil, that monster gets far bigger than you could handle. And yes, it will be a point of loss until eventually
people gather together in opposition of that evil narrative. The worst part of this all is that people are, and those are the people, by the way, and I really mean this, because I've worked with thousands of people at this point, which is where you'll become excellent. You'll be able to utilize your information practically, opposed to just like academia, That's not how you become good. You become good through teaching. And you learn most through teaching, and then through learning, and then through teaching. And then your students teach you something, and then you're like, okay, I'm not even the teacher. We're here collectively to pull everything that we can out of this universal truth, and everybody needs to have access to it. And perhaps I'm the bridge by which I get every single soul here in this classroom, or everybody in my lecture, to go, whoa, here's this. And then I'm there like blown away. Now I'm the same kid playing video games, right? And I had to just elevate perhaps all of what I was confused by that I had no understanding of, and present it into the light, opposed to hide with it. Because I was the most resentful person on planet Earth. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to believe. I knew the person, oh my God, I grinded my teeth at, was one friend of mine who was very successful, made money, and he did the one thing I wanted to do. Be a ballsy motherfucker. That's it. There was a cute girl, what's her name, what's up, sit down at the table, get her number. And I would do the dance with him when he was there. But when he wasn't, it was like, oh, thank God, no expectations for myself. I don't need to be real. I don't need to present my desires to women. And then he started his own business at a very young age, and he became a coach. And there was a point in time where I was like, I'm going to avoid him, but just like trickle in, because I want what he has, but I can't spend too much time around it, because it will bring out what's true in me. I was the same exact animal as he was. What differed between us was our value system. I didn't need to just go ahead and hold my value system over him because I was afraid of the animal I was. Instead, what I did was realize I'm just as big an animal as he is, if not bigger. What's going to make me who I am is not my avoidance of my darkness. It's the true choice that I have in the things that I believe. And that wouldn't be an avoidance of the parts of me I don't understand. It would be collectively with it. That is the truest thing you can do. That is a choice you can make. And by the way, what's the word that they use for abortion? Choice. Do you see the manipulation of that? They're not even considering what it means to truly choose. You're not choosing, honey. You're listening to a narrative that you get to hide behind around something that deeply you're going to struggle with your whole life. What it is to be a woman and the vulnerabilities that come with that. You could avoid it, repress it, and watch Acolyte, the Star Wars show, and you could slap a fake on, right? Or there's a certain point where you go, no, this is a bunch of shit. This is all a projection of ego. And by the way, that's so funny. That's a whole different conversation for another time. But you could see it even in our culture. Movies, television, even YouTube skits, narratives, politics. It's almost like it's in opposition of each other, which is the most protective thing you could ever do, which is what we're really talking about now, which is it's all protective. Even that show just cracked me up. What hogwash, horse garbage. Nobody should ever watch that. All the women are strong, powerful women, and all the men are weak and dumb. It was almost like it was written by somebody that hates men and likes to make women men, which hurts women. Because what helps women is making them women, functioning within that feminine. The feminine is 50% of the cosmos, and it is exactly what keeps reality as we know it structured. So this is the kind of world we live in, one where people do not question the credibility of things because they're too afraid of being rejected. It's when you're the most seen.
Those feminist motives aren't entirely unconscious. You hear this rationalization for it, especially in academia. It's a lot like affirmative action. They say, men have been dominating for so long, therefore we need to, in some ways inauthentically, rebalance the scales. We need to overly show confident women and weaker men. Showing weaker men, I can't see anything good that would come out of that. But you do want to see more of the positive masculine that resides in every woman, right?
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. The positive, you ever actually have really good representations of that in film. Mm-hmm. And I mean, some of the older film particularly, where like the husband is out on an expedition and then now there's a bunch of bandits coming to the husband's house, right? And she picks up a rifle and pops 3 in the head. You're like, well, thank God. But she's not doing that every damn day. And there's a point in a man's life where it's a beautiful thing to see the dude change a diaper, right? Because like collectively, masculine is collective with feminine and feminine is collective with masculine. But to pull yourself out of your authentic existence hurts you as a man. And the same thing as a woman hurts a woman. And like, there's something, even people watch film, they're like, oh, thank God, she's a really good mother. She's actually willing to tap into an aspect of her that has the masculine in it. And the same thing goes for the man, He's there to sit down with his son and talk to him, be like, what are you feeling? I just had a big day, I got my ass kicked, etc. Well, I'm here for you, let's get some ice cream. And then people go, whoa, that's kindness, isn't it? Yet, is that what you're doing all the time? No, you would, the world would fall apart if you did that all the time. Then you would feminize by definition, right? And then she would go out there in the corporate world, and you would lose the best parts of yourself. Most people set themselves up for failure because they come from a place of fear. They already are predicting this, which is what I hear, like, oh, I want to be a wife and a mother, but what if we go broke? And it's like, okay, there's a presupposition. There's a way you can confirm a presupposition, which is do the exact thing that you would do as if you were to fail, and you're destined to fail. If you gave it a shot and trusted him, you may succeed. But most people don't even want to trust the person that they're with. You know, it's like, honey, I'm going to start my business and we got kids. I need you at home with the kids. This just won't work. I'll fall apart. You'll fall apart. We'll lose our love. Happens all the time.
The bitterness that comes out of that, it's like a part of themselves always knew that that narrative was false or that they had greater potential. You see this especially in older people. If they don't achieve their dreams, they rationalize the sacrifice. I did this for other people, but then they're recognizing, well, where were my own needs? Why didn't I prioritize those?
That's the problems with hiding behind things at a very young age, right? Oh, I'm sacrificing. No, you just had a hard time getting no to your face. That's a scary reality. Like, I even noticed that myself when I started this. It was like, oh, I hired employees. I would do the employees' work so that I wouldn't make them work too hard. Do you understand that? That even when I paid people, I had a hard time asking.
Right, you set up the cameras yourself today.
I set up the cameras myself today. Yeah, he got sick, so there's kindness for you, right?
There you go.
Now, it would be totally me rationalizing if he clearly said, nah, man, I can't make it, something came up, right? Now, I would go, don't worry, totally cool. That's a lie, number one, not totally cool. You said you'd come, right? And then, of course, the alternative of that is me telling you, because I don't want to lose my quote frame and all my power, that I can't tell my employees to off when they do something that I don't believe is right? Now I'm weak, but what will I present to you? Strong. What do I become inside? Weak. That happens to people all the time in life and even in relationships, you know, like she gives another guy a hug and you're like, totally cool, I'm secure as and then you even tell that to your friends. You tell them a story by which how secure you are is. It's more than likely there's an insecurity there, a feeling that you had, right? And by the way, what is an insecurity if it's not an aspect of you that you don't have a relationship with that needs more light and love? Not a part of you that's not man. That's like my thing. When somebody says insecurity, nowadays it means you're not man enough. And it's like, no, there's a part of you that you do not have a good relationship with that makes you falter towards the weakness in you.
This is where the red pill narrative completely breaks down. It's so paradoxical that, especially with a loved one, to embrace the insecurity, well, there's a confidence behind that. It's, I trust myself, and it's even an olive branch. I trust you enough to take this in good faith. You know, I told Chloe, my girlfriend, about the insecurity that led into this conversation. Thinking about you, thinking, Naftali, I admire him in certain ways, but I'm also skeptical of him. And it turns out a lot of that skepticism was envy. And, you know, the red pill narrative is you even hint to your woman that there's a better guy out there in certain ways, and she's going to go chase him. And then Chloe embraces me here, and she says, I'm glad you shared this with me. She was actually excited. It was really funny. She's like, I've never seen you jealous before.
That's how you know a girl really loves you.
Yeah.
When you express perhaps maybe that you'll lose her in some way or another, or some sort of jealousy, and she goes, oh my God, I love you so much, right?
Yeah.
Because it's what are you showing her? You're showing her the courage to present your humanity. Also, the absolute courage in presenting vulnerability. There's courage in that. You would be weak if you avoided it, by definition. Every behavior of strength after that would be a mask for a weakness that she sees right through all of those walls, right? So, and this is for all women in general. Don't look for a man that you need to repair. Look for a man you want to build with. A man that you need to repair is one that won't present the vulnerabilities. A man that you can build with is one that shows you the vulnerabilities as you go. He's a prince. I'm a princess. I'm going to bring the king out of him so I can be a queen. Now, that's collective. And that's going to really help women in the modern days now, because they're also doing the exact same thing that the red pill guys are doing, running. So it's because people need a bigger metric. If what you're looking for requires a certain kind of understanding of yourself. Most women who say they want emotional vulnerability don't. They actually reject everything about themselves that is human. They don't express rage, they don't show sadness, they don't show pain, they show picture perfect pick me. And all they get from a guy is the exact same thing. And of course, the second that they're, why babe, why won't you be vulnerable with me? They're both the exact same person. That's the whole big lie that's going on out there, is that men and women are separate from each other. I got this the other day. A girl calls me. She goes, I love your work. It's so amazing. What you're doing for men is just remarkable. They really need the help. I went like this, and I was like, okay, I can get you on a call with one of my reps, and we can see if you fit in a program. And I said, what you just did there was separate yourself from all of mankind, implying that you're waiting for me to make one picture-perfect dude for your perfect ass. If you want to see a difference in men, present more femininity. You'll get more masculinity out of men very simply. And now most women weaponize their femininity, which is typically, those are the girls that the red pill guys can't seem to get enough of. The guys that weaponize their masculinity. Well, what is that? So weaponize something, just like trauma, is to take something you don't have a relationship with that can give you an outcome. So you're avoiding what it really means for you in terms of responsibility and authenticity, meaning it's the truth about you. And instead what you do is you use it kind of as like a gun, opposed to what you are, something that you collectively direct towards something bigger than you. So it's very interesting. I haven't really had an opportunity to get into so many conversations with most red pillars, just because I think this goes along with most people that hide behind establishments or institutions or trains of thought. Neither do they have the courage to not present what they want. They find other people's information to confirm their own insecurities. They aren't willing to challenge perhaps their own life, which is why I think that they're the biggest pussies to ever walk the earth, are the people that grab and gravitate towards narratives that aren't going to be in the incorporation of something bigger. Because that's the only way by which a man can expand. Men will not be happy at all without understanding that women have room to expand. They'll be miserable. It's in direct relationship with each other.
In psychology, there's this distinction between internalizing symptoms like anxiety and depression and externalizing symptoms like anger, substance use, risk-taking. No surprise, men are more externalizers, women are more internalizers.
It's in our anatomy.
So when I see this persona that I'll put up, when it works, it actually backfires. Later, I'll experience what my girlfriend and I call a slip. Like, I'll kind of just get sulky or resentful. I think it's because I haven't integrated my anger well enough. I don't get angry. And
that's a big one. I think I remember telling you that.
Yeah.
I was like, you don't get angry. And I said, that's a part of you that will tap into that, quote, alpha male. There's actually a lot of psychology behind anger and alpha males. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Continue what you were saying, how you would have the slip up.
Well, it seems like when you confront some people, the externalizers of their falsity, they might get angry, they might cover up, they might project onto you, they might cope with their feelings by drinking or using other drugs. They might try to find distractions.
The
internalizers, again, I think the internalizing symptoms idea, I mean, you see both reflected in Cain. First, he's sulking and resentful, but he also, in this ultimate fit of rage, strikes down his own brother. I think there's a natural trade-off between those two. And you see this, I won't go into the neuropsychology of it, but for the same hormones, like testosterone, that facilitate aggression, it also dampens anxiety. And women, beginning at puberty, not from birth, have higher levels of anxiety and depression, these internalizing symptoms. So it's sex-specific hormones. There's a deep parallel, I think, between the evolutionary biology of it and this psychological symbolism we're talking about. Like, what is the role of a man? What is the role of a woman? For whatever reason, I've adopted the more stereotypically feminine temperament, that I tend to be more anxious. If I get resentful, it turns into this depressive slip.
Interesting. And this is something that I love to challenge people with, right? There's an aspect of your aggression, right? More than likely related to the masculine in your life, which would be your father, right? And that's a difficult thing to do if your dad was an angry, controlling tyrant, to integrate that aspect of you. Well, that's the story of Luke Skywalker, right? If your father was once a Jedi, enough to pull your mother, which I'm sure you probably have a closer relationship with, I don't know, but probably not at all. So if there was an opportunity, there's this aspect, this darkness of you that's very similar to like Darth Vader, right? Luke doesn't become the guy that brings balance to the Force until he's able to lose his right arm in a duel with his father, meaning that when he underestimated perhaps what he had inside of him, he held back, and that cost him, right? And then he became aware of his own roots, enough to the point to find redemption in his own father, right? So the father was the guy that abandoned the Force, right? And Luke was the one who brought balance to it. They're both Skywalkers, right? And so the same thing is you have a lineage and a fate for you. You have a fate, to bring these two worlds together. And doing aggression work is something I actually do a lot of with people. And dude, it's how they bring out this empathetic, emotional, understanding man. Do you understand that? Mm-hmm. That rage is a very, very, it's an emotion you feel when there's injustice. It's what you see when somebody clearly is mistreating one another. And if you want to be evolutionarily psychological about this in relationship to chimps, that the alpha male is not the strongest, but he's twice as strong as the average one and 3 times more empathetic than the matriarchal chimp of the troop. Now, what's also very interesting about these chimps is that they experience rage in defense of others, including themselves. And it feels good. And that's the thing that's very interesting, is it feels good, right? Most people, anger doesn't feel good. They want to get it out. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be this. And I noticed this myself, and I'm subconsciously calling myself an alpha male there. But don't worry. I actually had a psychologist present this to me because I was telling him issues I was having, and it was like, I really, really feel for people. Like it was to the point where I was like, maybe I shouldn't do this. Like I don't know if I want to have a bad day because somebody came in with their demons. And well, he just gave me a little bit of an understanding about how empathy comes at a cost. You are going to have to be somebody who's far more integrated with the humanity that you have, closer to it, not further away, right? And it's like that big paradox by which you have to come closer to the thing that you reject the most about yourself, that has hurt you the most, in order to be healed by it. Luke Skywalker brings balance to the Force when he's able to realize he's the son of a Sith Lord who was once a Jedi. So what he does is he doesn't resist the power, he harnesses it. And Anakin was told his whole life, don't get emotional. Don't get emotional. You'll turn to the dark side. What does he turn to? The dark side, right? He becomes the guy. He didn't just turn into like light dark side, like kill some kids, right? No, he turned to conquer the universe, dark side, right?
Archetypal,
right? And so you see how far storytelling has strayed and how much our culture has deteriorated and how divided we are. We are so divided. We are divided because conveniently, as the institution provides you that I wait till marriage, so does the person who's on screen camera is protected by that institution. At no point, if people are willing to accept that God is real, God is good, God is here, and perhaps maybe that you should strive towards an ideal that you deeply struggle with, there will never be anything in the middle, meaning that we'll forever be alone. That's the existential dread that a lot of people are experiencing now. We call it the loneliest society of all time, and it is the loneliest society of all time. Because the people, even me, I take accountability for this, I don't even show that to the world. And I realize how many more people don't. Because if we did, think about how together we would be. We would look past differences. We would be beginning to accept that maybe we're not so different, and we're actually very, very similar. Perhaps maybe the porn star and the virgin are the same, right? And what makes a good woman isn't the avoidance of her dark sexual nature, but the integration of it collectively towards an ideal like monogamy. Ooh, well now your sex is worth something, opposed to it being cheap. And so the same thing goes for men, This is a world where I think that people are looking less and less towards academia. I think people are looking more towards the thing that brings us all together, our humanity. And they're looking for people that kind of have that shit on lock. So it's more or less not so much about what you know, but about who you are. And that really speaks to the soul.
Yeah, there's this ego in me. A lot of it feeds off of Harvard, because I've had the good fortune of interacting with these brilliant professors and learning from them. And I don't have the same insecurity, this resentful envy. And I think it's because of the age gap. There's this thought of, I can be you one day. But when I'm dealing with someone my own age, especially someone outside of the establishment that protects me, well, it's, again, the simultaneous envy, and there's almost this giddiness to it. Like the thing I admire.
There's a deep curiosity to you, and it's why I love talking to you. I look at you and you care and you listen. You're very curious. You're not perfect. And I also think that there's something deeply challenging about me that provokes something in you that you don't want to face that would make you a lot like me.
Oh, it's that integrated aggression. You see it in your speaking style, which I really like, Naftali.
Thank you.
It's when you raise your voice, you can tell it's coming from passion, but I imagine it's very polarizing. It might scare some people. The couple times that you did it in this conversation, you're practically yelling, and I'm sitting here laughing. It's not a mocking laugh. It's like this smile, this giddy, I want to tap into that.
Yeah, that makes me happy.
There you go.
By the way, aggression is the emotion that makes a lot of people human. And I wanted to share this with you because it was something I did with a client. I noticed how critical you can be and psychotic If you don't have aggression is almost like the part of you that like warms you. It's heat, it's passion, right? It's affection, it's intimate, by the way. And I think that everybody who's had good sex can agree that a sex and aggression go very well together. Also, sex and sadness goes well together. I think really pretty much all the list of human emotions, if you don't reject them, go really well in intimate environments, right? It's just there's often a lot about what we reject about it. So the number one rule in it is being able to realize how you're skipping a step of expression. You're losing the one thing you want most. The thing that you've went to college for. The thing that made you a Harvard graduate. The thing that made you a straight A student. To really say what's on your mind and to say what you mean and mean what you say. And that's just like, but the way that you need to do it is so against the way that it's going to be presented, right? It's going to be the thing that was all around you the whole time. And now that's called the individuation process, by which you realize you've come this far, not because you went in the wrong direction, but to face what you needed to face that was in front of you every step of the way. Your willingness to stop and go, wait, here it is. Now you bring it in collectively with the information and trauma and perhaps all the control that you've looked for. And that's how you become integrated. You now bring that in. And now you don't just create a linear life. You create a life by which you create from the inside out. It's kind of like you're drawing a circle, right? And people's circles keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Oh, touch the beginning. You're a fool if you keep making circles. You will never understand the three dimensions that you could be experiencing in your life. And you go, boom, you touch it. Oh, I need to confront this. And then now it creates this like spiral. You're going deep, right? You're creating a singularity within yourself, the individual.
And do you think it's necessarily the case that anyone who suppresses their aggression, it's going to outlet in other ways, whether that's passive aggression or depression, anxiety?
And resentment. It's going to be, resentment is frozen anger. Passive aggressive is like, is anger that comes out the seams, right? Comes out of the things that you haven't taken. And then also anxiety. There will be people that you meet that will invoke that and you will swallow it. It will also, and this is the crazy part, it will give you a lot of stomach issues. And that was something I noticed when I would swallow it a lot of. I would have like little boxes, which made me look towards like Reiki body work. It's much easier than just having a guy try to get it to activate, right? You can have somebody press a part of you that has it all stored. And then you're like, oh my God, I'm frothing at the mouth. I'm a animal. If I was a character, I'd be Wolverine. And you like it. And then you're like, oh God, I hate that I like it. I'm gonna be just like my father. Bingo. Are you? Are you the same man? Last time I checked, your whole life was in opposition of him. I think you'll be just fine. It doesn't mean you need to get rid of the humanity that he had. Imperfect people are typically determined by their value systems and the things that they're not integrated with. You could be as strong as you want in your values. If you're unintegrated, darkness wins every time. But if you are aware of it, and then you integrate it, you become the transmutation of it, opposed to the rejection of it. And so that's kind of your life's goal, which is to be the elevation of it, to direct it towards your highest purpose. This speaks to you because this is you. I'm nothing more than that. You're left with all of your beliefs about yourself and perhaps all the things you've confirmed. You can challenge it. I know you. And if you improved yourself, not only things would get better, you would have access to something that you desire so deeply because it's so you. And that's the thing about desires. You didn't just come here because cool dude on Instagram. I'm not even the dude who answered the message. I was pulled to something deeper, right? And that was something I was like thinking. Now there's like purpose behind it. And you're contributing as I'm contributing. It's not like, oh, my son. It's not that.
Now, how do you balance this aggression and dominant side with, you've mentioned that your success comes from channeling everything into this moral framework, your Jewish values.
Biblical values. I uphold Jewish tradition, but biblical values. And I think there's a big distinction there because I think that most Jews don't associate with biblical values, unfortunately. I'm culturally Jewish. I keep what the B'nai Yisrael was told to keep, As Judaism went along, and like a lot of religions have gone along, it's been unfortunately institutionalized and separates you further from the individual, which what the biblical stories are about. I could do a whole lecture on it, a much more humanitarian point of view of it, so that people can really understand the psychology, the philosophy, and the stories that have shaped mankind to be conscious thinkers.
So 2 questions there. The first is, these moral values, do you believe it's fully encapsulated in the Bible, or is it more like the real truth are these archetypes? They kind of exist abstractly like mathematical truths do, and different world religions are ways of tapping into that. And then the second question, regardless of what value system you subscribe to, there's this Lucifer problem again. It's this idea of you're bending the knee once you acknowledge there's a truth higher than yourself. That seems in direct conflict with the dominant side. And I think one of the reasons that I channel my aggression in this passive form is it lets you be the boss. Well, actually, that's not true.
Well, it does within your own experiences, right? It's the avoidant guy who's saying he did the right thing by walking away when he's truly afraid, right? So that was your ego right there. It doesn't give you access to it. What it does give you a feeling of is virtue, power. It does give you a feeling of power, right? Because I got it on lock, unlike these other guys, right?
Right.
No, you don't have it on lock. You repressed it, right? Then the ego goes, this dude, right? If that's happening and you know it's happening, you can go, sit your ass down, listen. The moment I changed my life is when I had somebody challenge me. That's when I felt love for the first time. I didn't have friends. I didn't. I had people that dealt with me when they were around me. The first friend I had was a person that was smoking weed in my backyard. And I come up to him and I just go, I didn't even say anything. I just look at him, and I was on my high horse of 21, came out of my relationship, hustling like a mother 6'2". I can do whatever I like, 6-pack, you know. I'm on abstinence. I've been reading Matthew McConaughey, Green Lights, you know. And he goes, here's the first thing he said was, he just shook his head and looked at me. And he goes, your tiger's locked in a cage. You lie to yourself every day. And I was having nightmares about a tiger coming out of a cage and killing everybody I knew.
That's Jungian synchronicity.
That's Jungian synchronicity, right? And my ego went, you motherfucker, I'll knock your jaw off. And I thought that was so convenient. And I was like, sit your ass down and listen. And all I got was roasted. And it was the first time I ever felt love. And it wasn't roasting, he really cared. The next thing he told me is, you're Tyler Durden. You're like a figment of everyone's imagination. You're not real. I was like, oh. And then the last thing he told me was, you're either dumb as or you lie to yourself every day. Then I hung out with my old friends and told them the story. And nothing they said was real. It rung in my head. I went pale. I knew I had to face myself because I was lying to myself every day. By the way, I would have loved to have been an idiot with the amount of fear I was experiencing, but I was also praying for it. So were you. You wanted it. You desire it. It's just not going to happen the way you want it to. It's going to be a part. That's the thing about all gifts, is that they're typically given when you quite literally have nothing. There's nothing you could do. It's not your life. It's not what you know you know. It's not even what you know you don't know. It's what you don't know you don't know, and it's exposed by other people that could either slaughter you again or heal you. That will change you. An act of kindness by which somebody doesn't criticize or reject it and exposes you to the unknown, those moments in your life typically are the hardest to integrate because they go against everything in your childhood, meaning you could let go. You could experience yourself for the first time. Your life is not your childhood traumas. It's something far more. In fact, it was there just to get you here. You needed something to drive you. What was it going to be if it was not survival and instinct? But there is something beyond yourself that you're aware of, and it's truth. And if you could incorporate that in your life, you could free yourself from all of what you experienced, because the embodiment of your freedom will be in the manifestation of the things that you rejected. Today you will own it and harness it, and you won't do it alone.
This brings up this deep question of front-loaded suffering. I've got this angel and devil on my shoulder. The angel is the one that says, given everything you know about how your life has turned out, the optimist in me that says, I'm very happy with my life. I would not pick to be anyone but me. And sometimes I genuinely believe that. And other times, there's that devil on my shoulder, that Cain mindset of, I want to be anyone but me. I want what that person has. And I oscillate between those two. It's like this internal war. It's, again, this archetypal battle between heaven and hell, right? And when I give in to that resentful mindset, generally things get worse. When I lean into the optimism, generally things get better if that's accompanied by the necessary sacrifice and hard work.
But there's still a conflict, right? There's still one on one side and one on the other. I don't think the Cain and Abel story is something to get rid of. It's something to integrate. The hard thing to do is to experience the Cain as you consciously choose the, so to speak, the approach towards giving it your best shot, the Abel, right? Because they kind of fit within that whole story. The resentful aspect of you is an aspect of you that needs to be considered. It does. Because if you look at that, I had the same thing in my life.
what was presented to me in my what you call sulkingness, my own capacity, my own gifts. I had a twin brother. There was nobody I was more jealous of at 16. He had the class, he looked like Shawn Mendes. His jaw went through his face. I never really had a face like that until I got older, but I didn't have that. And every time I'd take a Snapchat with him, the girl would say, who's that? Send me his Snapchat. And I would naively send them the Snapchat and go, yeah, it's just my twin. Yeah, this girl hit you up. They'd start hooking up. And then I'm like, what the happened again? No, I'm good. Now it's directed towards him. Go to a party. Girls just flock around him. And they're just like trying to make out with him. And he's like, right? And my own twin brother, he's of my flesh more than anybody in the whole world. I respect and admire in every way possible. I recalled the story. I didn't disregard it. And I just said, will I be like Cain? Or will I understand what God really meant by improving yourself? I became so damn good at speaking to people at 16. Most girls that I would make out with were well, not 30, but they were like 24. And that was the crazy part. As I looked far older and I utilized the fact that I would present myself as an adult. And that made me really good at presenting myself as an adult, didn't it? Which is why we're here, which is why you're way more mature than how I perceive you to be even. And it's because I was given that one chance as a young kid to not go my brother, but instead, hell yeah, let me find me in understanding you being you. That's the whole thing, is that the Cain and Abel thing is not the problem. That's how it manifests with the ego. If you take it on its own, it's the process by which you become you. You find your gifts. You have to. It's going to feel dark. You will feel abandoned by God. But he's still there. That's the crazy part. So they're not in opposition. They're collective. One of them you just have to remove the ego dialogue from. You need to kind of clean it. It's like a blade. You want that. Because you're going to need to cut through a lot of bullshit. So my willingness to not resort to that. Don't resort to it. Don't give in to it. Consider it. And then I found, whoa, I can really speak to people. And that's where me and my brother really differed, and where most people kind of go, where'd you get this kind of speaking ability? I wanted to develop seduction at the age of 16. That was my shadow. Then that gave me something that people were distinguishable. They were like, this dude can talk, right? Everybody would notice it. And hey, I would take the first step. Maybe the girls wouldn't approach me, but hey, I actually enjoyed approaching them, right? And then of course, as you go through life, you begin to change and evolve, and those things you let go of too. Yet it is the aspect of ourselves that we need to be more patient with, as you are right now. Be patient with it. That will open you up. To pick one or the other seems conveniently avoidant of what it has to consider. There's some things to consider because it's still a conflict you have, and that's how you resolve the conflict. It's through considering the deeper narrative behind what's being presented.
Now, this for me is deeply tied up with the free will question. This is why I study brain development. And you can't really prove it, but you can think about it. Everything, if you consider a causal chain of events, starting from the Big Bang, leaning up to now, you're a product of your circumstances, your genetics, your environment. And, well, I don't think it's really productive to eliminate your own free will. That's, again, just an easy pass towards victimization and not taking the necessary sacrifices you need to improve your life. But I've adopted that position now. Any new circumstance I encounter, I can ask myself, do I want to be Cain or do I want to be Abel? But when I think about my past, the further back I go, I think, well, clearly if there's this 5-year-old child being hit by his tyrannical father and running away screaming and crying, where's the test there? There's not the same question of, there's a better way to respond to this. It's a test for, are you going to properly integrate yourself? Only in reflection.
Interesting. I mean, that's a very different question. It's almost a different archetype. It's a different story. It's closer to Luke Skywalker. You know, what happened when he lost? He cried. No, denial, right? There's an aspect of you that needs to tap into that. In fact, it's very interesting. It's almost like it needs to get beaten out of you. And it's kind of harsh to hear that, because now you can't romanticize it or make it about you. If you didn't make it about you, you can hear the point, which is people that get that have that happen to them. Is something I did with my client, is I had to put them in the state by which for the last week, I was gathering all the things his dad did to him. And I would put him in a trance and just go through all of those things. Majority of it was like, please stop. Please, I don't like when you do that. I don't like when you do that. I don't like when you do that. And his voice changed. I'll rip your throat out. You talk to mom like that, I'll smash your head against the fridge. Huh? You want to see who's small now? You want to see who's small now, mother? Pick on someone your own size.
And it was like the guy came back. You know what happened? We went on a walk after, and we were in Santa Barbara because we were doing the retreat work out there, Santa Barbara, Malibu. We're doing a lot of kind of like the synchronicity stuff that makes you go, okay, it's fascinating. And there was this beautiful girl walking by, and it was after, like I saw, there's so much sadness and pain came up too. So much sadness and pain. But he wasn't walking with it with a limp anymore. He was walking with it. And it was like he gave a space for himself because he allowed himself to feel safe. And aggression, you need to have that to feel safe. Or else a guy like me will scare you. Just over a screen, oh, block him, right? And so what ends up happening, the girl walks by and he just goes, where are you going? She's like, I'm going to my dorm. He's like, let me walk with you. He puts his arm out and she walks with her. And I was like, I guess no session today, you know? He ended up hanging out with her, went to her dorm and told her the whole thing. A lot of emotions came up to the surface. She was there for him. He was like, he had a very abusive father. But now he's no longer running away from that, he's embracing it. And that's the whole thing that's very difficult about life. The thing that you're the most afraid of, you subconsciously worship, which is why your fear should be directed towards the thing that you want to achieve, the highest ideal, which is, you could even say, God, directed towards God. And that scares us the most. Well, that's good, because there's a level of fear and worship in that, right? But if the thing that you fear is the thing you run from, and we know the story, it always happens. The manifestation of your running is avoiding it. There is some work that you have to do that will unlock that, and there will be a lot of pain and sadness. And then there will be more ego with the pain and sadness, but this time no resistance to aggression. Your willingness to confront it will take, versus 2 years, 2 weeks. And what that creates is somebody who makes others feel safe, including yourself. And you see others and they have gifts and you go, how can I learn? Because it's not like you are given no access. You're more than enough because you embody that by bringing all of you in. To take that away from you will make you look towards what most people in Red Pill do. They're fatherless, right? You made yourself fatherless. He wasn't perfect, no. But you experienced a lot of what you call reality in relationship to your child perspective, which could equal a trauma. And then you created an insecurity by rejecting the aspects of you that are just like him. And now that is challenging. Guys that mirror it in any way possible will all be the thing that he is, which is just too damn convenient. Because that's not the case. There are people out there that choose to do good. People that really are good are those who are conscious about the parts of them that could hurt others. They have to be conscious of it. I'm aware in my relationship, dude. Drywall, holes, screaming and shouting. You know what I was before? I was Matthew McConaughey. I was cool. I don't get angry. My dad only gets angry because he's emotional. That was the most narcissistic thing I could ever come up with, right? You see how I'd even hold, that when I noticed it, and this is for you, watch how you hold that over others that are. Hold what you've become. If you hold it over others that are, separation, no improvement. We improve through others. And the more you separate yourself from others, the more prone to your ego, and of course the devil's manipulation, if you want to be symbolic about it, right? Meaning that you've isolated yourself from Adam in the garden. You're left to your own vices and information you don't quite understand with the embodiment of seduction, the snake. And it's going to play into the thing that you tell yourself is most true. And what is that? You desire it. Take a bite. You'll be like him. See the ego there? It works in direct relationship with that narrative. And it manipulates it, and then you're left, You're kicked out. You lose everything you can have, which is the story of most people's lives. And so you go from, wait, is it a biblical story or is this a truth? And it seems to be a truth. It stood the test of time.
But that's that metaphysical question I touched on earlier. Mm-hmm. Is it just a biblical truth, or is there some transcendent truth that the Bible's tapping into, evolutionary biology is tapping into, game theory is tapping into? There's just truth, and that is identity with God.
There's an existential truth that the Bible taps into. And it taps into it so damn well, it stood the test of time and has created what we know the modern thinker. It has created consciousness outside of society, revelation within the desert, free people without a home, right? But a promise, land. There's a lot of, in the story itself, it teaches you something that allows you to tap into it to where you don't need to reference it every 5 minutes, but you will reference it for other people to understand the story. It's in support of life. Life is what we are here to experience. This is where we find God. I know when people open religious texts and they're like, I'm finding him here. That's level 1. there's other levels by which you're literally experiencing it in the people around you and the dialogues you're having. And it all seems to be mirror reflections of those stories in your life. And you could see them, and now you know you're not alone because it's been mapped out. You don't have to suffer, not the extent that you do. You do need to feel, though. And I think that's a difficult thing for people to distinguish. I need to feel, but I'm suffering so much. How could I accept that? Your suffering comes from your inability to feel with meaning and purpose. It's immense, and that's most people's lives. So the biblical stories tap into something far bigger than our own understanding, that even some of the greatest writers in the world, Oscar Wilde, Mark Twain, Kurt Vonnegut, these people are like, they're tapping into things. And by the way, a majority of these people, and even are agnostic in the beginning. They write enough, they're like, this is something I can't comprehend. And they will start to spiral and go to control and ego until they fall apart as people. And then they feel what you call humility, which is, I'm not here to understand it, I'm here to experience it. That scares us. Maybe there is a reality that isn't tragedy. Maybe there's a reality where there's tragedy in it, but it is not a tragedy. It is something that is teaching you here, existentially, that you don't understand, and neither do I. We try to make sense of it the best that we can, but it's all coming around us, and it's encompassed inside of us, and it's reflected around this whole universe and the stars, the moon, and the sky. And we're just here, not just for a ride, but a ride by which we pay attention to what is speaking to us. Maybe you're just crazy, right? Which is why the stories are good to understand. You're telling me none of the biblical patriarchs, this is undeniable. And I want people to access this in themselves. Why? If you open yourself enough to you open yourself enough to questions without insecurity. And that's Moses. He looks at the bush and he goes, why does this bush burn without being consumed? Not, this changes the way I see the world. I can't, right? Which it is. That's something that'll challenge you, right? But immediately he was able to receive it. And it's because he saw both worlds. He knows where he comes from. And this is another really good one in the biblical stories. Like, look at this. People often just see like a guy with a beard with a lightning bolt. Like, where does this speak? I want people to look at their own life. A man born in two worlds, and in the world by which he is drawn from the Nile, right? A mother puts him into a wicker basket on this river current, right? To be at the hands of fate itself, right? It's a river, it's going to be chaotic in nature, and it's the Nile, there's crocodiles. And his little sister, another woman, is looking over the man that's going to be speaking face to face. So there's one woman, two women, and then there's the third one, Batya, right? She's the one that reaches out her hands to grab it and is overwhelmed with compassion for the child. And she calls him drawn from the water. It's not even a Jewish name, it's an Egyptian one. And he is raised on the laps of Pharaoh as he goes, every other boy in the Nile. This one, drawn from the water, he's special to me. And then he grows up to be a young man. And there's this one terminology, he says he goes down to his people, meaning he had humility. He wasn't just an understudent, he knew he was from both worlds. And a guy who has perspective of both sides is typically more prone to willingly go down to his people, meaning the things that most royal people separate themselves from, that keep them tyrannical tyrants. He voluntarily went down to, what did he see? Injustice, the way that they treated the Hebrews. And he kills the man. And then Pharaoh finds out, not just that he killed the man, officials do that all the time, but that he's from the other side. And then he runs, right? What does he run? He runs and, I guess you could say, integrates the less chaotic life, because that's a very chaotic life, being a prince of Egypt. And then he finds himself with the priest of Midian, right, in relationship to his daughters, and he shoos away, or I guess you could say fights off the other shepherds who were heckling the shepherdesses. And he stays there for 40 years, until Moses calls from the bush, right? Oh my God, isn't that people's lives? You know, there's a point by which, you run from certain things until it comes back to you. Your life all means something. Something is calling to you from the most arbitrary, ridiculous place possible. A bush, right? Maybe a conversation. If you're willing to pay attention, he speaks to you through everything. And you're called towards greatness, which is what Moses is there for. Does it scare you? Yeah, he turned it down multiple times. Until eventually God nearly killed him, he turned it down. And that's the one thing I want to leave this on, which is you are given gifts. If you do not use those gifts, not only are they taken away, you're punished. That's why I think we experience suffering, and why we look towards greatness and we look towards other people, and we're ripped apart by it sometimes. And we don't understand. But your willingness to express that you're ripped apart by it, and that it just reminds you of all the resentment you have in your life, that's the step by which you improve.
Thank you, Naftali.
Thank you, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really mean
Honor.
it. It really has.